The HOA tried to bully me with bogus fines. They didn't know I'd end up owning the trail they loved most, and I locked every gate behind them. They thought they could punish me for using my own property, until I turned the tables and bought the land under their feet. They fined me $1,000 for hunting on my own land. One fine, one fight, one forest. They picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. Want me to turn this into a YouTube thumbnail/title set as well. It began like any other peaceful morning. The sun rose over the treetops, painting the sky in soft orange hues as I sipped hot coffee on my front porch. The scent of pine drifted through the air. The only sounds were the birds chirping and the distant rustle of wildlife. It was a moment of calm, the kind of serenity I had worked hard to secure by moving out here. I had purchased this property 5 years ago, a modest house nestled on 14 acres of land at the edge of a small wooded town. The area was governed by a homeowners association, or HOA, which I had never paid much attention to. I followed the rules, kept my lawn trimmed, paid my dues, and minded my own business. I wasn't here for neighborhood barbecues or block parties. I was here for nature, peace, and the freedom that came with owning my land. That morning, I found a white envelope slid under my door. At first, I thought it was junk mail or a local flyer. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Notice of violation. Unauthorized discharge of a firearm. Fine, $1,000. My hands trembled slightly as I read the letter again and again. According to the HOA, I had violated their community disturbance policy by hunting on my own property. I was being fined $1,000 for firing my rifle during legal hunting season. I felt anger rise like a flame inside me. I was a licensed hunter. I had the necessary permits from the state. I followed every law. In fact, hunting was one of the main reasons I had bought this land. It was teeming with deer, wild turkey, and occasionally even the rare coyote. This was my sanctuary, and I was being penalized for simply living in it the way it was intended. What made matters worse was the tone of the letter. It wasn't just a notice. It was dripping with condescension, as if I were some reckless teenager firing guns at cans for fun. It accused me of endangering the safety of the community and threatening the peace. I called the HOA office immediately, hoping it was a mistake. "This is no mistake," said the woman on the other end, with a rehearsed flatness in her voice. "Several members of the HOA have complained about gunfire coming from your property. It is disruptive. The fine stands." I asked her to name the members. She refused. I asked her if they understood that my property was private and I was well within my rights. She simply replied, "Our rules apply to the entire neighborhood. You are not exempt." I hung up, seething. I couldn't believe it. Was this some sort of power play? A neighbor with a vendetta? Or was this just the HOA flexing muscle for no reason? Either way, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this go. The week after I received the fine, I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. Cars parked along the tree line, people walking near the edge of my land. At first, I thought they were just enjoying nature, but then I saw something that clarified everything. It was a Saturday morning. I was out on my ATV doing a perimeter check when I spotted a small group of people walking through my woods. They were laughing, taking photos, dressed in hiking gear. And leading the group was none other than Mark Bentley, the HOA president. He was a tall man with silver hair and a self-satisfied smirk. I had seen him a few times at HOA meetings, always the loudest voice in the room, always reminding everyone how lucky we were to have him as president. He was the type of guy who thought being head of an HOA was the same as being mayor. I stopped my ATV and watched them from a distance. They were walking along a trail that ran across the back part of my property, just near the stream. I had seen signs of foot traffic there before, trampled grass, small piles of trash, even a couple of makeshift stone fire pits. But I had always assumed it was from the occasional kid or maybe a lost hiker. Now it was clear. The HOA had been using my land as part of their unofficial hiking route, and not just occasionally. Judging by the wear on the trail, it had become a regular event. That realization made my blood run hot. So let me get this straight. I'm being fined for hunting legally on my own land, but they think it's perfectly fine to trespass for their afternoon strolls. And the man who signed off on my fine, Mark himself, was the one leading the charge through my woods. It wasn't just hypocrisy, it was arrogance. They treated my land like their personal park and had the audacity to punish me for using it how I saw fit. I could have called the police right then. I had every right. But I didn't. Not yet. Something inside me clicked that day. If they wanted to play games with property rights, then it was time to show them what real ownership looked like. I began doing research. I wanted to know everything about the trail they were using. How far it stretched, who owned the connecting lots, whether there were easements or rights of way. It didn't take long before I discovered the golden ticket. Just beyond my land was a 10-acre stretch of forest that connected directly to the public hiking trails further up in the hills. This lot was key. It was the path the HOA hikers used to access the deeper woods. Without it, their route was severed. Even better, the land was privately owned by an old farmer named Mr. Callahan, who had inherited it from his father. It was mostly untouched forest, not suitable for farming, and had no structures on it. I gave him a call. Turns out, Mr. Callahan was looking to sell. He was in his 80s, had no kids to pass the land to, and didn't want the hassle anymore. He had tried negotiating with the HOA months ago, but they offered him peanuts and tried to pressure him into a donation for community good. He declined. They called him greedy. He laughed them off. When I made my offer, I didn't insult him. I offered market value in cash and promised to maintain the forest just as he had. He smiled and said, "You're the first person who treated me like a human being." We signed the papers within 2 weeks. I now owned the 10-acre connector lot. Combined with my own property, I now controlled every foot of the trail the HOA had been using. To say I felt powerful would be an understatement. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about blocking a trail. It was about sending a message. You don't mess with people who mind their own business. So I began drawing up plans. Signs, fences, surveillance, legal filings. If they thought they could bully me into submission, they were about to see what happens when a quiet landowner decides to fight back. The following weekend, I acted swiftly and decisively. With the kind of clarity that only righteous anger brings, I arranged for 2 heavy-duty steel gates to be installed at the 2 primary trail entry points. Each gate came with industrial-grade locks, mounted firmly into concrete bases I had poured earlier that week. I wasn't taking any chances. These gates weren't just for show, they were the physical embodiment of a final, unnegotiable boundary. Next came the signs. I didn't want there to be any doubt or plausible deniability. I ordered dozens of bright yellow metal signs with bold red lettering. No trespassing, private property. I personally nailed them into trees and posts every 100 feet along the perimeter of my property. They were impossible to miss. It didn't matter what direction someone might approach from, they would see a clear, legal warning. Trespassers would be prosecuted. But I didn't stop there. This wasn't just about making the trail inaccessible. It was about making a point. I had my attorney draft a formal cease and desist letter addressed to the Homeowners Association. It cited property law, trespass statutes, and civil liability language in no uncertain terms. I had it delivered both via certified mail and by hand delivery to the HOA president's home. The message was clear. Any future attempts to access my property would be met with legal consequences. There would be no exceptions, no special permissions, no community events, no apologies would reverse it. The door was closed, and I held the key. At the next HOA meeting, I showed up, not to argue, not to negotiate, just to watch. I sat in the back row as pandemonium broke out. Residents who once waved cheerily at me on the trail were now red-faced and shouting. One woman sobbed about how she used to walk the trail every morning for her mental health. A man in his 60s claimed it was the only exercise he could get without driving miles. They blamed the HOA board, and then inevitably they blamed me. You're being vindictive. How could you be so selfish? This is a community resource. I remained calm, silent, and unmoved. If they thought they could guilt me back into compliance, they had another thing coming. I wasn't heartless, but I was no longer willing to be taken advantage of. The HOA had made their bed. Now they could lie in it. And I'll admit it, maybe I was being a little vindictive. But at its core, this wasn't about vengeance. It was about respect. You don't fine someone hundreds of dollars, humiliate them in a public meeting, and then expect them to turn the other cheek when you've been breaking the rules for years. They poked the bear. And I didn't just growl. I bought the forest, built a wall, and posted guards. It's been a year since I shut down the trail, and I can honestly say I haven't looked back. The HOA, predictably, didn't take it lying down. They pooled together a legal fund and tried to challenge my actions in court. They filed an injunction claiming that the trail was an established community easement. But they had no paperwork to support that claim. No legal deed, no written agreement, just decades of assumed privilege. My legal team was ready. We presented aerial maps, property surveys, and old HOA newsletters that actually referenced the trail as adjacent private land. It was a slam dunk. The judge not only ruled in my favor, but publicly chastised the HOA for their entitled behavior. He even noted that their fine against me was improper and could open them up to further litigation if I chose to pursue it. I didn't need to. Winning was enough. Since then, life has changed in all the right ways. The weekends that used to be filled with the sound of hikers laughing, dogs barking, and the occasional drone buzzing overhead are now blissfully quiet. The only noises I hear are birdsong, rustling leaves, and the occasional deer or fox passing through. The forest has returned to being what it was always meant to be. Wild, serene, and mine. I've taken up bow hunting, something I never could do with people constantly wandering through. I set up trail cameras, and for the first time, I'm seeing wildlife that had long been scared away. I planted a small orchard, expanded my vegetable garden, and even built a gazebo by the creek. It's peaceful, personal, and perfect. And here's the part that still makes me smile. Property values in the HOA started to drop. Realtors used to advertise access to private hiking trails as a key feature of the neighborhood. Now, they awkwardly explain to buyers why there's a locked gate and bright yellow signs. I heard one family backed out of a deal when they learned the trail was gone. Apparently, the nature access was the deciding factor. I don't celebrate their misfortune, but I also don't mourn it. Actions have consequences. The HOA played a petty game with the wrong person. They underestimated how far I would go to defend my land, my rights, and my dignity. Sometimes standing your ground isn't enough. Sometimes you have to buy the ground they're standing on, and when you do, you finally get to enjoy it in peace. If you enjoyed this story of quiet revenge and sweet justice, don't forget to hit that like button and share your thoughts below. Subscribe now for more powerful real-life stories you won't want to miss.